Have you ever heard of a ruler being executed because he was both loved and treasoned at the same time? Yeah, well, you're about to. Today, we'll be discussing the fascinating story of one particular street name in Cairo's Halmeit al-Zatoun, and that is Tuman Bey Street. Tuman Bey II was the last Mamluk Sultan to rule Egypt. That was before the Ottoman Empire conquered it and dropped the Sultanate in the year 1516. As weird as it may sound, Tuman was not the actual ruler of Egypt at the time. In fact, it was his uncle Consul Ghori, who was not quite loved by Egyptians as Tuman was. Also with us here today to discuss the street name topic is AUC Professor Nahel Nagor from the Department of Arab and Islamic Civilizations. Hi Professor, how are you today?
I'm fine, and you? How's everything at your end?
Everything's fine, Professor. Thank you so much for asking. So today we wanted to discuss the importance of the history of Tuman Bey to the point that Egyptians had to honor him by naming a street after him.
Okay, he was very popular amongst the Egyptians and very much loved. Of course, there is a controversy regarding this point. Actually, some people would say that no, he was not loved by Egyptians, especially after his rule. Before his ruling Egypt, he was popular, but after it, he was not. Actually, I believe that history books, they have to be questioned. We shouldn't take what we read just for granted, and it is the ultimate truth.
This is a very interesting point, Professor, because it actually brings me to my next point. How did Tuman Bey get to rule Egypt in the first place when it was his uncle, the Sultan, that was ruling Egypt at the time? Consul left Egypt that year to fight the Ottomans in Syria, who were led by Sultan Selim I at the time. So as a result, he left Tuman in charge of Egypt.
So what we really know about him, that he considered Egypt his country. Of course, he was a Mamluk. All Mamluks were not Egyptians, but he considered it his country, and he loved it very much. And actually, he defended Egypt against the Ottoman invaders. He considered them invaders. Again, many people would say that, okay, but he was not an Egyptian, so he is also an invader.
Unfortunately, Consul was killed in that battle. And so eventually, the Ottomans made their way to Egypt. By that time, Tuman had already gotten the chance to build an army for himself, which included both Mamluks and Egyptians. This took an ugly turn though, as the Ottomans defeated Tuman in the Battle of Al-Raidaniyya with the help of their strong armory and number of soldiers. This led to Tuman Bey's withdrawal and return to Cairo, where they ended up fighting the Ottomans again in a battle that lasted 4 whole days. Tuman eventually fled Cairo, but was betrayed by the Mamluks when they revealed his hiding place, which resulted in Sultan Selim eventually capturing him. He then ordered his execution and had his head hung in front of the door of Zuwayla for 3 whole days.
Bab Zuwayla is the other end of Al-Mu'izz Lidin Allah street. It's the other end. I mean, it begins with Bab al-Futuh and ends with Bab Zuwayla, or the other way around. You can say it begins with Bab Zuwayla and ends Bab al-Futuh. It's the same thing, but it was there. It was a very brutal, I think, execution. Egyptians are not used actually to this kind of treatment.
This was intended to cause the Egyptians both pain and heartache, as they loved him dearly. That, and to fear the Ottomans.
He made him an example for them that anyone who trespasses, anyone who would go against me, this is what will happen. That,
Yes.
okay, Tuman Bey, the warrior, the knight, look what happened to him. What about you? Poor people. Poor meaning as weak people.
Back to Tuman Bey's street name and how it got it. Ironically, the street was originally named Selim al-Awwal during the Ottoman Empire, which translates into Selim I. That was until recently, when a Helwan University history professor proposed it to be renamed. And that's a wrap on today's podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that you've both enjoyed it and learned something new. I'd also like to thank Professor Nahel for her time and insight on the topic. Thank you so much, Professor. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, dear. I hope this would be beneficial for your podcast.
Thank you so much again. Bye, everyone. See you next time.